Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and today I've got a very special guest. I've got Steve from Rock and Metal Invasion. How's it going, mate?
Yeah, good, Peter. Yeah, nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely, and please check out Steve's channel. It's a really good channel. Does a lot of good stuff on metal and record reviews. So give it some love. It's a really good site. Today we're going to do a little bit of a fun chat. We're going to talk about our earliest concert memories, predominantly in rock, hard rock, and heavy metal. And just off the bat, we're just going to go to share our top five memories, earliest concert memories, any anecdotes, any thing that they remember, and we'll just shoot the shit and see how we go. So over to you, Steve. You started off.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm just going to start with my first concert. So my first concert was in 1990, and so I was probably about 18, and it was Anthrax, and they were touring New Zealand on the Persistence of Time tour. And now, to be honest with you, at the time, I was getting into the hair metal bands, but I wasn't really a big thrash fan. But I knew Anthrax, and I was definitely interested in going to it. It was a metal concert, and as you know, Peter, we didn't get a lot of acts coming through. Maybe Australia got a little bit more than New Zealand. That would maybe be something interesting to talk about, because I know that I know Motley Crue have toured Australia, but they've never toured New Zealand.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah. So I don't know how these things work, but maybe some bands just decide it's just not going to work in with our schedule. But we hear about it here in New Zealand. We go, what? They've gone to Australia and they're not going to bother coming over here,
Yeah.
But so it's great. A band like Anthrax is coming to New Zealand, and so I'm old enough now to start going to concerts. So yeah, so I was like. I was very keen, but I was also interested too because the support act was a band called Shihad, and they were just starting out. I don't think they hadn't released. I think their first EP might have come out around '91. So
what a killer band! Love them.
Yeah. So they're a very young band, and I knew of them. When Wellington's not that small a place, but you would see the guys around, because I grew up in Wellington, and I even ended up working with Hamish Lang, who was the bass player in Shihad. He left, I think, in '92 or something like. He didn't stick around very long, but he was one of the first initial bass players for Shihad. Yep. And John Tuckett, the singer, you'd see him working at the Chelsea Records as a record shop in Manus Mall in Wellington. So, you'd see the guys around, and so now that was interesting too, to see them. So, and so they were on first, and they were fantastic.
Were they well received? Were they well received by the audience?
They're Wellington guys too, so,
yeah.
And they sounded awesome. Granted, first live band I'd ever seen. So just to hear a live band, but, yeah, no, they were really good, and it was interesting too when Anthrax came on. I saw them in the mosh pit. They just came out and just they were just with everyone else. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, they were probably at the peak of their powers, in my opinion, in that era, 89, 90. So you've seen a really, really good concert.
Are you talking about Anthrax?
Yeah.
Maybe they were at the peak. That could be true. I'd enjoyed Shihad so much. I kind of tired myself out a little bit when Anthrax came on. But no, it was great. Like I said, not a massive Anthrax fan. I went out and bought their album just before the concert, just so I was familiar with the latest material, but I hadn't heard their earlier albums. So, and I've sort of gone back since then and heard them. But yeah, at the time it was all kind of new to me. But great concert. It's just going to your first concert's a big deal, and
absolutely. You buy the merch, you buy the T-shirt. It's all part of a ritual. Mate, how many were at the gig? Was it like is it like a 5,000 seater? Was it like a hall or an arena? Just for the audience, just to describe.
Yeah, it was at Wellington Town Hall,
Right.
which is quite big, but I don't remember it being particularly packed out. I remember being, I was able to get as close as I really wanted to if I was willing to push my way through a little bit. So you could get pretty close. One thing I remember too about the concert, I met up with a couple of guys who, I don't know if this is true or not, but they said that they'd had pizza with Anthrax earlier that day, that they'd met up with them and they'd said, hey, come to Pizza Hut with us. And so they'd had pizza with the Anthrax guys. So
that's good.
Pretty cool. And I don't know if Anthrax were like big partiers at that time. I don't think they were. I'm not sure if they were big drinkers or anything at that time. I think they might go up later, but So I don't know what they did after the concert or anything like that, but I do remember. I had like a 60-minute walk home from the concert, but it was me and a mate. We just
Well, my one goes back to September 1986, and it was Dio. So the Dio band. So this is, Australia's always been pretty well starved of metal. Maiden did tour. I think we got a Twisted Sister tour on their Stay Hungry. But in regards to a lot of the stuff that you and I would have read in Kerrang or Smash, Hit Parader or all those magazines, we didn't get it. I guess they looked at the sales and they probably thought that metal was a very niche cult type of genre, and it just didn't justify with the exchange rate for the acts to come down. The bands would go to Tokyo, they'd do Japan, but that's it. They would just go back to Europe, and they would go to Australia, and that was just go back to United States, and that was a big bugbear. But Dio came down, so that was the third time he'd been to Australia. So first time he was in 76 with Rainbow. Oh, would I've loved to see that. 1980 with Black Sabbath with Heaven and Hell. And then finally in 1986 with the Dio show. Didn't bring the full show, so didn't have the Dragon. So it was a very condensed show. No Vivian Campbell, which was disappointing. We got Craig Goldie. So it was more of a precursor to the Dream Evil album. And Goldie was fine. But, those first couple of Dio albums are just fantastic, and it's the tasty guitar licks of Vivian Campbell, and I sort of miss that.
Yeah.
So, but it was an event. The whole day was an event. So me and my mates went to a Channel 7 Studios, which is like a TV station. And there was a show called Sounds, Donny Sutherland Sounds, and they had Dio. He was interviewing Dio. We were in the audience. We got to meet him. Right. And he autographed the Sacred Heart album, and I asked a few questions. I asked probably too many because he had this big Fijian bouncer. He was like built like a brick shit house.
Yeah.
And he said, "That's enough questions, son." Like when you're a young kid, you just sort of get excited, and I'm asking him all these questions, and I was probably taking too much of Dio's time, and all right, that's enough, son.
Yeah.
And then,
but I got the impression, Ronnie Dio was a pretty cool dude, eh? And
he was just fantastic with the fans. He was fan friendly. In every shape or form. He was just, very much with the fans. Mm-hmm. So the show was at the Sydney Entertainment Centre. It was supported by two bands that were in the local metal scene. One was called Boss. And Boss, I was right into them. And they were, I used to basically, me and my friends, we used to see every single show of Boss. So they were like Def Leppard meets AC/DC, good pub rock band. And another band called White Widow, which I saw a few times in the local metal scene. And they supported Dio, and Dio came on. Entertainment Centre, I think, was about, the capacity was 11,000, but I think it was about 8,000. They may have had the curtains right at the back. But, you know, at the end of the day, Dio probably made a loss on the balance sheet, but he brought it out because he knew that, you know, we were starved of metal.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big tick. And he just played, you know, just tracks from his from his works. So, you know, there was some from Rainbow, Long Live Rock and Roll. I think he did Man on the Silver Mountain, Heaven and Hell, did the old melody, and then he did some select works from Holy Diver and We Rock, and then he did a little melody. I think the encore, I remember he did We're Stars. Remember the Stars
Really?
charity song? So did that at the end. So
I've never heard a version of that. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was the earliest memory, and it was just very communal, and all the metal fans were just sort of hanging out in the foyer or outside, and usual larrikin behaviour.
Yeah.
And but it was a good concert, and I think we finished up at the end of the concert. We went to another place where Boss were doing a midnight show, and we saw that. So it was a very long day, and that's what you did in the day. It was not just going to the concert, but it was like a trail of events. It's just one of the earliest memories I have. So that was good.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very jealous. One band I would have loved to have seen is Dio.
He didn't pop over. I don't know that. I didn't research whether he went to New Zealand, but he didn't pop over.
I would have known about it. My gosh, yeah, I would have if he'd come over here. I mean, at least. I mean, granted, I wasn't really aware of him until, you know, maybe 87, 88. But I would have known if he'd come over here. But like you say, you know, maybe he did make a lot. But you know, back in those days, it's the opposite now. But you know, bands would tour to sell their albums. You know, so even if you make a bit of a loss, you get people maybe to buy your album or be aware of your albums and things like that. So that could be also part of the reason.
But he was one of the ones that really sort of, it was very fan friendly. And as I said, they would have made a loss, you know, because, but I think he really wanted to preach the word and go. And that's why I've got big kudos for bands like Iron Maiden, because they started small with the fan base in Australia. Like they would play the Horden Pavilion, which has only got 4,000. And then they kept on coming back, and they built the fan base. And now they're a cross-generational band, Steve. I mean, they'll play the Acer Arena, and that's 15,000 or 20,000. They've got a huge fan base in Australia now, and that's what you need to do. You invest it. But there's been, unfortunately, some of those bands, like Judas Priest, they came like 40 years later. And there was a little bit of a fan base there, but they, you know, I guess it was not economically viable, and they didn't have the fan base that some of these other ones that invested. You've just got to start small and build your way up.
Yeah, makes a difference. Yeah.
What's your next one? What have you?
Next one, we're going forward about 3 years. I'm not sure if this actually was my second concert. It's quite probable that it was. It might seem like 3 years is a long time after 1990 for Anthrax, but you know, I'm not sure. But the next concert I remember going to was Guns N' Roses at it was in Auckland. I think it was Mount Smart Stadium. I think it was the stadium. That's what it was called then, I think. I'm pretty sure. Which is a huge stadium. So
yes,
45,000 people.
Yes,
I think there. Now I'm living in Wellington, so it's in Auckland. So this would often happen. You know, if a big band did come to New Zealand, they may only go to one of the cities, and Auckland, being the biggest city in New Zealand, would often be the one that they would choose. So, you know, if you wanted to see a band, and even sometimes for those smaller bands, you know, so it's not just the big bands, those smaller, but they have a bit of a following, international bands, they'll come to New Zealand, but they'll just play, a club in Auckland, and they won't sort of, you know, you'd really appreciate it when you see like a band is coming to New Zealand, and they're going to play Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. So they're going to play.
Absolutely, they've got to make it economically viable. And this would have been around the Use Your Illusion era, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So 93. So it's, I think Use Your Illusion's come out maybe in 92
Yes.
or 91. But they're on that sort of album cycle. And they're bringing Skid Row, which Skid Row pretty popular as well, of course. Yep. And the local act was a band called Dead Flowers. Had a bit of a following, but and they put out a few more albums in the 90s. But they were sort of a hard rock band. So that was the concert, and so I was in Wellington. My dad offered to drive me up, so I was just going to go to the concert by myself. No one else I knew wanted to go. And so my dad didn't want to go, but he said, "Oh, look, I'll take you there." So he drove us up to Auckland, and so he just dropped me off at the gate, and no cell phones then. So I guess we just arranged the time. I'll meet you back here at 30 or something like that. So so I go in there, and I was a bit disappointed when I went there because they had barricaded off into two sections. So you had the premium section, which was quite limited, like only maybe a couple of thousand people in that sort of section, and then everyone else was further back. And I don't know if you had to pay more for that or if it was just whoever bought their tickets first got that one. I have a feeling it was a cost thing. Like you paid a bit more and then you got the premium seat. And I thought I should have got those seats because to me it made a difference. Not being able to, I'm always been like that. I've always been like with a concert. I want to get as close as I can. So that was a bit disappointing. But so I get there and Skid Row. I don't even remember Dead Flowers. I may have even missed them. But Skid Row came on. They were pretty solid. I like Skid Row. But I was just. That wasn't the big show. That wasn't what everyone was there for. And then, I'm there by myself, and then I just remember waiting after Skid Row came off. And waiting.
Don't tell me they started the show at 1 a.m. in the morning or something.
I honestly I can't remember. Obviously everyone knows they've got their reputation, and they did it that night for sure. It was Axl's birthday, so maybe they had something to do with it. But give them credit. They build up that anticipation, don't they? And then
So just to be clear, when did they start? Did they start really late? Did they?
Well, I can't tell you the time. But it was dark, and this was, I think it was summertime. So it was dark, and I remember a helicopter flew over. And it's just got this massive cheer, like, oh, that must be Guns N' Roses in their helicopter coming, and we'd already been waiting for probably an hour and a half at that time anyway. And it probably was them coming. But, so it's like, okay, well, they've still got to get out of their helicopter and, who knows what else to get before we're even going to see them. But, to be fair though, once they actually got on stage and performed, it was great. It was a good concert. A big concert. It's more than just Guns N' Roses on stage. They had backing singers and the big.
Yeah, it was the full work show, was it? The full work. Yeah. And right, okay, that's interesting.
I've never seen a big show like that before, so it was cool. It was
Yeah. Well, I mean, I saw them in what did I see in the early 2000s, and he came on at 1 a.m. in the morning, and this is around the. I think it was around the time that they were doing the Chinese democracy. And it was just basically Axl and a lot of other players that weren't in the originals. And it just was bloated. It was just a lot of guitar noodling and, I had to get home. And there was hardly any public transport at that time. So I just had to pull stumps at 3 a.m. in the morning. It was still going on. And that sort of behaviour is a little bit disrespectful. It might be okay for them, but 1 a.m. in the morning to kick off the gig, that's just ridiculous. But I'm glad it sounds like yours was semi-reasonable and you,
It wasn't 1 a.m. No, it wasn't. I found my dad after the concert and everything like that. He'd probably been waiting for a couple of hours or whatever, but
Well, Another concert memory I had was David Lee Roth and Edelman Smile. So he did a concert series, I think, along the east coast of Australia, and that was the Killer band that had Steve Vai, and it was off the back of the Edelman Smile album, which was absolutely stellar, absolutely killer. All the players in that band, Billy Sheehan, I think Greg Bissonette, just fantastic. But Steve Vai's guitar work, and that's the only time I think I've seen Vai live. And, he was just ripping through Van Halen, the Van Halen set, and also the Edelman Smile album. And, we didn't see Van Halen with David Lee Roth in that era. So 1984, they were sort of pretty big in Australia. Like Jump went number 1, 1984 charted. There was getting a lot of radio airplay on the various shows, but that Van Halen did not come. I saw them much later when they had Wolfgang on bass, but I haven't seen the original lineup with, the bass player. That was a bit disappointing that I've never seen the original lineup of Van Halen. But I got to see Lee Roth, and he's charismatic, and he's a great frontman. Doesn't have the greatest voice, but charisma in spades. And again, I don't think that was quite a full house. It might have been 80% or 90%. One thing I do remember was that there was this surfboard, and it was in the middle of the. There was like a surfboard on a wire, and he'd be riding this surfboard right up to the middle of the audience, and then do that little California Girls. He'd do a couple of songs off that the California Girls EP that he did.
Not my favourite. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really good, but very charismatic. And it was good to hear a serious guitar player have a go at doing the Eddie Van Halen on those Van Halen songs, and quit himself very well. So yeah, that's a concert memory for me. Seeing Diamond Dave probably at his peak. As I said, I saw them much later when they did the Different Kind of Truth tour. Which was one show in a festival called the Stone Festival.
Oh, yeah.
And they were great too. But, yeah, seeing Dave in his MTV glory, that was definitely a cherished memory. I think that was like 1988. Skyscraper. It just came after Skyscraper. I'm sorry, I did say Edelman Smile, but Skyscraper had come out. So there you go. That's my second memory.
Yeah, it's funny. Van Halen, they didn't bother much with Australia and New Zealand, did they?
No, they had a fan base, but I don't think they toured much outside America anyway. I don't think they did much in Europe or England. I think they were so prolific in America. They had such a fan base, they didn't really need to. I mean, like a couple of their records are diamond, 10 million. I think 1984 and Van Halen 1 have certified like over 10 million sales. So they're one of those bands that didn't really need to be international and tour the world. And that's why, you and I in Australia and New Zealand have missed out on so many acts of that type, like Rush, and there's a long list. There's a long list.
Yeah, there is.
Anyway, this is not a whinge-a-thon. I'm not going to whinge about it.
No.
About what we've got. Yeah.
Maybe when we're not recording, we could have a bit of a chat about all the bands that haven't made it. Actually,
that could be another. Yeah, it could be another episode.
It could be another show. Yeah, it would be. It's a pretty big list, actually, isn't it? When you stop thinking about it, but you just got to appreciate the ones that you do get.
You do.
Yeah, so I'll move on to, and this is probably a good one to move on to, just on this sort of subject of the bands that didn't make it here, because I'm going to talk about the Big Day Out festival, because that was always a great opportunity to perhaps see those bands that that you thought you were never going to see, that maybe wouldn't make the effort by themselves, but they've come out as part of the festival, as a festival bill. And I can't remember the first Big Day Out that I went to, what year it was exactly. They were all sort of, because that came to Australia as well, didn't it? Is that right? Was it the Big Day Out in Australia?
Well, the Big Day Out was actually originated from Australia. So, it was a festival that I think the first lineup of the Big Day Out, if memory serves me right, was 1991, and it had the Ramones and a little-known band called Nirvana.
Yeah.
And Nirvana actually headlined the Big Day Out just as they went to #1 in America, which is really rare when you've got an international act playing our waters, but having a #1 hit in their homeland.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've got a similar story, like with Nirvana. Just before they break, or just before they're breaking, because I saw the White Stripes at the Big Day Out, and this was before they'd become popular. In fact, it's unbelievable to think about it now, but there was probably about 50 people watching them when I saw them. So they went on the main stage. They were just on a little side stage, and it was raining, so people weren't there, and there wasn't very much cover. So a lot of people were just not interested. And to be honest with you, I'd heard that they were a band that was worth checking out, but they're an up and coming band. They might be worth checking out, but they're not a metal band or a hard rock band specifically, right? So I was a bit, maybe I'll go and have a look. But I happened to be walking by, and I was like, "Whoa, yeah, that's pretty cool," And so it had some sort of Led Zeppelin kind of vibes to me. I was like, "There's a bit of Zeppelin kind of thing happening here." So even though it's just a guitar player and a drummer, but I thought they were awesome, man. It was just like, and I think back on it now, sort of like, being able to get that close and just experiencing them in that sort of a scenario, of course, later on, of course, they become really huge. So, so that was pretty interesting. Other bands I remember seeing at the Big Day Out, I saw Rage Against the Machine when they reformed. So this is when they've reformed, but they'd also played the Big Day Out, I think in about 93 or something like that. But I didn't see that. What's interesting too, going sort of full circle. So I saw Shihad supporting Anthrax, and then I guess when I went to the Big Day Out, would have been I don't know, maybe it was about 10 years ago, something like that. Shihad are like almost headlining it now. You know what I mean? So because they're big in New Zealand, and so they're playing on the main stage, and everyone knows the songs. They're singing along. So it's quite interesting to sort of see.
It is, isn't it? Like there's some bands in the in our world are huge, but you go across the equator and who?
Exactly.
Like, to you and I, like bands like Cold Chisel, The Angels, some of those bands that, like Bread and Butter that we know, but they couldn't get arrested because they're not known. So we're in a big world. It's a big universe. I'll throw a couple of other 80s memories or late 90s. So I saw Striper. That was interesting. They were right in there. They had the full outfit, the Bumblebee outfit. It was a bit syrupy, just from memory. I know that, Sweet, he has a great voice. The guitarists are great, but the songs to me, and my recollection at the time, they were a little bit syrupy. And then there was a ritual at the end where they throw Bibles at the audience. And there were a few Slayer fans in the audience, and I think they were just turned up just to stir the pot. That was interesting. There was a couple of people that were dressed up like Alice Cooper, and there were a few death metal fans. You got to understand that in this era, we're starved. There's no metal, nothing. And Striper, irrespective of their religious beliefs, these people, the metal fans will go. And I think they just thought, oh, it's Friday night. Let's go to Horton Pavilion, see Striper and stir the pot.
Yeah.
But I saw it because, on the musicality type of it. And I've got some of their stuff now and I listen to it and I think it has aged well to my ears. But at the time, I thought it was a little bit Bon Jovi-esque. And I'm not a big fan of the Bon Jovi-esque type of, that type of rock. But that was funny. That was unique. It was a clash, a culture clash, in this one concert. And that certainly was an experience. We also saw Motley Crue came out on the Dr. Feelgood tour, and I think that was 1990. So Australia got them really late. So how many albums it took them? I think Dr. Feelgood finally went to number one, and I think that the manager probably saw that, okay, the exchange rate's okay. They've got an audience base there. Let's go and see them. And I thought they were pretty average. I don't think they were that great. But I think we were so starved of rock and metal, some of us had rose-coloured glasses that, wow, we're seeing Motley Crue, and, you and I as teenagers, we would have had all the albums like Shout at the Devil and all those sort of albums and, sort of they're the bad boys. And when you finally see them, I don't know, have you ever been to a concert where you see them, but you've got the rose-coloured glasses, like there's niggling sort of thing that you think they're not as good as I would have hoped they were, but I'm just so excited I'm seeing them, It was kind of like that. It was there wasn't a lot of spontaneity because there's so much in the show. You've got the fireworks, you've got Tommy doing the cage and he was going, doing a spin and doing a solo. You got Vince singing every 5 words or so, even then. You got Mick Mars doing a solo, and that was like, bourbon time. All right, let's go to the bar. He just did this terrible solo. It was just like a slide guitar. It was almost like David St. Hubbins out of Spinal Tap. It was just playing these 3 notes, and it was diabolical. And it was bourbon time at the bar. So that's the cue in a heavy metal concert. When there's a solo, bourbon time.
Yeah.
But that's the memory. The memory it's not memorable.
Yeah.
And I've seen them a few times, and I'm not convinced they're a great live band. I'm not convinced.
No, well, I've only got what I've seen on video and stuff. It doesn't seem like they're a great live band, but they got some great songs though. So I wouldn't be interested in seeing their farewell tour, even if they brought it to New Zealand.
Yeah. Will they get through it? I'm worried about Vince. I really think he's a mess, and I've just seen over the last 12 months on footage of him singing, and it's he looks like he's out of shape. He sings every 5 words, and I think there's a real question mark. And the latest news is that Tommy Lee cracked a few ribs, and they've got a replacement drummer in to cover for the show.
You wouldn't have expected that. Everyone was worried about Vince, and it's Tommy Lee who's out. But so
I think it's a big question mark. But I think they would have been best to see them when they were raw, they were punky. The Too Fast for Love, that era. The first couple of albums, I think, just before probably Theatre of Pain, that's where it went really downhill and they went glam. I think every kid that loved that imagery, the really kind of evil and Mad Max Banshee look they had, was very disappointed when they saw Vince wearing pink satin outfits, and the music was just so tepid on that album, and I think everyone was quite disappointed. So I think early CRÜE, they probably had a bit of edge, and their live performances are much better from what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I would say with them, each album they've always sort of had a different image, and you got to at least give them credit for changing it up a little bit each time, and because they had the sort of glam look for Theatre of Pain, and they went to the sort of biker sort of leather, the motorbike sort of look, and I don't know, but maybe that's just them trying to move with the times. But actually, the next concert I want to talk about, though, can I do my one now, Peter?
Yeah.
It does actually have a Motley Crue connection, because it's Rockstar Supernova. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I do.
The group that they had a TV show, and of course Tommy Lee was the drummer, and I enjoyed the TV show because I wasn't into American Idol or any of those other talent shows. At least I thought this is a show where they're playing rock music, and they're finding a vocalist for which hopefully is going to be like a kick-ass hard rock metal band, because they had the guys from Guns N' Roses, Metallica, and Motley Crue in the group. So I thought it was had potential to be a good album, and that the band might turn out to be something good. And I think the guy who won it, Lucas Rossi, I think his name is, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a great singer and everything. But yeah, it was pretty. I think the album itself is not particularly heavy, but they did tour, which it was really surprising, because I think the album bombed a bit, really, didn't it? And they didn't really last for long, but maybe they had booked this tour prior to the album coming out, and there were expectations that they were going to be huge. But they gave away. I went for free. They were giving away tickets to this concert because they just couldn't sell them, and the radio station was just giving them away. And so me and my wife, we got tickets, and we went along. But actually, it was a good show. We had a great time. Because top class musicians, of course, playing, and there were songs from the album, but they had some other songs as well I guess from their band.
Who was in that band? It was you had Jason Newsted, you had Tommy Lee, you had that guy from Jane's Addiction, Dave Navarro.
No, it was Gilby Clarke, I think, from Guns N' Roses.
Gilby Clarke.
I think that was he.
Yes, you're right.
He was the guitar player.
But Dave Navarro was involved in that show. Whether he was a judge or a mentor, I remember watching it. Yeah. So, but then when they toured, Jason Newsted had hurt himself, or something had happened. So he wasn't even there. It was, I think it was a bassist for the Black Crowes. I think a guy from the Black Crowes. Right.
Was the replacement. So he wasn't even there. But
Well, I've got that album, and I bought it in a $5 cheapie bin, and I reckon I've only played it twice, and I couldn't tell you one song off it. But like everything, anything that's in my CD collection's open for re-examination. So I might give that one a listen. But I just know that my Lucas Rossi was not my choice to get the. I always was Team Toby Rand.
Yeah,
I think he came second or third. Yeah, and even Delight, the South African lady, female vocalist, I thought she was pretty unlucky not to get the award. I think she came second. She was good as well, but Lucas was not my choice.
Right.
Was he interesting live? Did he had a bit of charisma? Was anything you remember? Was he a good front man?
yeah, well, like I said, they were all top class guys, top class,
Yeah.
like very professional, and you think maybe too, like Tommy Lee, it's sort of like, he's probably the biggest star of the group,
Yeah.
probably, but you think maybe he's not going to take this too seriously, but no,
Mm.
he was really into it. He was like, really getting into it with the crowd. He's really, and he's on the drums, right? But he was like, really interacting with the crowd, and
Yeah.
So I was pretty impressed with him, and
So the front man was it was actually the drummer in a way. He was the go-to guy in the band.
Stars,
Yeah.
so that people know,
Mm.
and they would never see Motley Crue in New Zealand that I know of. So
So
it's
that
like,
was the next best thing. Yeah.
Tommy Lee, so
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
John Toby Rand, have you heard? He ended up
Jude Cartel. He was in a band called Jude Cartel. I actually saw them live, and they were playing a local pub, free, and good songs. He's charismatic. He is a good front person. He's got charisma.
Yeah, I like it.
He's got the X. I think he's got the X factor, but he just didn't kick on. But I, as I said, I don't know if it's an Australian thing, because I was sort of go team, Toby, because it's the Australian connection. But I thought he had the most charisma, and had that rock star element, and that's the whole purpose of the show, to find the X factor. But he didn't get it. So what am I to know? But no, that's a good one. That's a good one. Another one just off the cuff is I saw Metallica off the And Justice for All tour, and they were supported by Mortal Sin. So Mortal Sin are like Sydney thrash legends that I've seen numerous times at pubs and clubs in the day, and they're just an awesome band, and they were certainly generating a lot of heat. They got signed to I think Music for Nations, or one of those independent labels, and they were on the way up, and it was a great bill. And my memory of the show was it was long, and a lot of people were chanting out Jason, Jason. So there was a lot of support through the crowd for Jason Newsted being the new guy on the block, because it's tragic circumstances. I mean, they lose Cliff Burton, and he's like the heart and soul of Metallica, and Jason Newsted was on the, Flotsam and Jetsam, and, great bass player, and he's the new guy. And, that's one thing I remember. It was just a buzz seeing Metallica, because we'd followed them, but actually, seeing this new lineup and Jason, and, the crowd was really, in between every song, was chanting Jason, Jason. It was just like a mantra. It was quite unusual. But they were good. It doesn't recall, there's bands or live concerts you remember like, wow, that was memorable. And I think they were sort of, I would rate it as good, but not great. It doesn't come back as a memory as something that was pow, shiver up my spine. But it wasn't like Motley Crue that I was just rose-coloured glasses. I'm just so happy to see you, even though, live you're dubious. I thought they were good, but it probably wasn't quite in that upper echelon of, greatest live performances I've ever seen. But they did a lot of songs off the And Justice for All album. And then they went into a bit of a melody of some of their early stuff off the Kill 'Em All album and Ride the Lightning. But no, it was good. It was good. And seeing Mortal Sin support them, who were like hometown heroes, was really, really good. And very lucky to see them.
Yeah, I think they came to New Zealand too on that tour as well. But I didn't see them. But yeah, did make it over here. So they were meant to tour 2 or 3 years ago, I think, and then James Hetfield went into rehab or something like that, and had to cancel the tour.
Yeah, yeah. I actually saw Metallica in New Zealand because I had lived in New Zealand for a short while, and I saw them at the Big Day Out, and
Yeah,
they were great.
yeah.
And
So they were the headline act of Big Day Out, pretty much?
they were the headline act, and there were a couple of bands. One band that was like I actually thought they were probably the best band in the world, and it was the Datsuns. I was really on the Datsuns train for a while. And the Datsuns played a 30-minute set, and for me, I think that was one of the greatest live 30-minute sets that I've ever heard. They didn't outstay their welcome. They just revved it up, and they were really on top of the world. And you thought, oh, this band's going to go somewhere. And like a lot of their contemporaries in that garage rock early 2000s, they just fell off the cliff, like the Vines, the Darkness. Even though the Darkness have still got a bit of a supporter base, but there were a lot of bands in that early 2000s that were in that particular Big Day Out that I thought were going to be huge, but they just didn't sort of carry it on. The old, first album, The Debut, is the great album, but they can't seem to follow up the success with the second.
Yeah.
But Metallica were headlined, and they were great. They just did the stuff, and basically they were like the Uber group of that whole festival, towering over everything. They were really good.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting too that you think a band like Metallica headlining, a festival which has a variety of acts. Like has acts like Bjork and pop acts.
Full on
not but alternative. Nothing, not metal at all. And but often it was the metal acts that would headline.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you got any other honourable mentions or any other ones that you can come to mind?
I mean, I thought I could go through some of the bands other bands that I've seen, but they're nothing particularly memorable. Some were better than others, obviously. I tell you what, one of the best bands, one of my favourite concerts was actually Slayer. I saw Slayer in Auckland. I don't know, would have been maybe early 2000s, something like that.
Yep.
And probably not them at their peak, but and I'm not the biggest Slayer fan in the world, but I think they're just such a great band to see live because it's just so intense.
Yes, 100%.
Heavy, and you can just have a good thrash and a good mosh, and just I just enjoy that kind of stuff. I'm not necessarily even taking in the music as much as maybe in other concerts I might be. I'm just enjoying the environment. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think as these bands became more popular, like metal in New Zealand and Australia did become quite popular. And a lot of the bands, their LPs would go to number one. So in the 80s, it was a very cult genre. But then as time went on, a lot of these bands became very popular. And we were starting to see them tour and put a pit stop in Australia and New Zealand, which we didn't see in the late 80s. So, and that Slayer is an example. So some of these bands, like in the Northern Hemisphere, it's inconceivable that, it took them 10 years to come down here. And in some cases, we saw a lot of the bands where they were just not at their finest or very much in their advanced careers and kind of feel a little ripped off, don't we? Because it would have been good to have seen these bands when they were at their creative and their live peak. But like Slayer, I know that I've seen them a few times, and even in the 2000s, they just put on a dynamite show, whether you like their albums or not.
Yeah.
They're absolutely stellar. I guess I got a few honourable mentions. I saw Aerosmith on the Pump tour. I don't know if that ever came out to New Zealand.
No. I would say one thing Aerosmith did do, which was really unusual, a few years ago, they toured New Zealand, but they only played one place, and they played like Invercargill or Dunedin or something, like right at the bottom of the South Island. Yeah, that's weird, eh?
That's bizarre. That really is. They played the Stone Festival, supporting Van Halen, the different kind of Truth Van Halen, or a kind of Truth, and not so good. But I saw him on the Pump tour in the early '90s, and Tyler had the swagger. Perry's guitar work was tasty. It was a good show. That's one I remember as thinking, wow, they put on a good show. And you can see he's just got charisma in spades. So that would have snuck into my top 5 or into, my selections up there with Lee Roth. But definitely Aerosmith in Pump. And they were, right going north in the charts everywhere around the world, and their songs were Janie's Got a Gun, and there was so many hits on the radio. They were kind of on the peak of their powers, so definitely. But I think that as metal and hard rock grew and became more popular, we started to see more acts. But in the 80s, it was definitely a bit of a desert. It was a bit barren. We just had to do what we had, and just buy the records, get the imports, read Kerrang magazine, and just hope one day. But even to this day, there are still acts that I would love to see come down our way. Michael Schenker, he's at the top of my list. Every time I'm on his Facebook feed and he's I'm doing a tour of Japan, I'll write in, and Australia, please. But it's all economics.
Yeah.
So is it really worthwhile Michael Schenker to come down and play a 500, get 500 people in a 1,000-seater? Unless they do it as a co-headlining and they make it economically viable. So, like, we get a tour, we got a co-headlining tour, which I think went to New Zealand, where you had Whitesnake and Scorpions. Now, that's a good co-headlining tour. Like, individually, they may not be able to fill the big stadiums, but collectively, they've got enough of a fan base and they can make it sort of viable. So maybe that's the way to get Michael Schenker. Maybe double bill with Scorpions or something. Get the brothers together. Fighting. I don't know.
I'm just sort of thinking, now that things are opening up a little bit, my one chance perhaps to see all these bands that I haven't seen is, book a trip to one of those and go overseas. Go to the M3 festival, one of those kind of things where, you see the list of bands and you're going, oh my gosh, this is just like amazing. So absolutely.
And on these boat cruises, that seems to be the big thing, isn't it? Just do boat cruises and it's a one-stop shop, because I know you like a lot of the hair metal, and they've got a lot of those boat cruises where it's just, every day they have it's like a big day out
for the old rockers. They just want to sit back on the boat and there's some bands in that genre that I love, like Kix, Kix. Yeah.
No chance it'd come down here. I mean, there's no supporter base, but that's a perfect opportunity. It's on a boat, and make it a bit of a holiday, and you get to see all your favorite sort of acts that probably that you like.
Yeah, I mean, I've got no interest at all in going on a cruise, but if you throw some, hair metal bands on there, now I'm interested. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Steve, that was fun. That was nice talking. Just catching a lot of memories. A lot of it's ad hoc. It's just on the cuff sort of stuff. You tell us what your memories are. Put your comments. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation, and also Rock and Metal Invasion. Don't forget, Steve's got a great channel and lots of really good content. I saw, you were ranking the Wasp albums. That was a really good show. So, check that out. That's a really good one. There's another band that never came out in the day.
that's my actually. Now you talk about bands that you're wanting to, that you'd really like to see because they're about to go off and do some touring. If they haven't, maybe they've even started.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd be first in line for that one.
Absolutely.
I think Blackie still sounds okay. So yeah, I would love to see that. I'd love to see that. But
absolutely. All right, no worries. Well, as I said, tell us what you think, share your memories, and we'll catch up with you soon. Cheers.